Hey, it's Dry Bear. Stellar Blade, the hot new action-adventure game, is coming out April 26th, and we just got done playing the demo. However, if you've been living under a rock over the last couple weeks, there has been growing drama and frustration around the game overall. And since the demo last week, that frustration has been growing to a fever pitch, with people actually having meltdowns and freaking out, which has brought about both good and negative things to come about from this situation, including a brand new interview from the CEO of Shift Up, the developer of the game. One of the hottest points of discussion came off of this article from IGN France that says it's not new and other games have chosen to highlight the strengths of their female characters, but where a Bayonetta stands out with an iconic character design, or a 2B from Nier Automata inspires an entire generation of cosplayers, Eve from Stellar Blade is just bland. A doll sexualized by someone who has never seen a woman. Now, IGN has since apologized for this post, and I'm not going to name any names here and who was involved. You're welcome to do your own research there, because I don't want to contribute to that whole conversation. But it is an interesting point to think about, is why some people are getting so fixated on this game in particular and getting so upset and outraged over the presentation of the character in it. Which, by the way, it is bizarre to me that they would use representations like 2B in Nier Automata, or the Bayonetta series of the Magic Witch that uses her hair to strike down targets, as representations of strong, proper female and feminine expression, even though most of these games and references face the same kind of backlash when they were first launched. In fact, every single one of the Bayonetta games has had lots of subtle undertones that focus on sexuality, femininity, and the like, while also incorporating that into the gameplay, animation style, and presentation of the combat as well. Now, this sort of concept is not new to humanity. In fact, the older something gets, the more it fades into the past, the more emotions start to be removed from it, and starts to be remembered fondly as a classic. So if you don't stay focused on what actually happens when a game comes out, 10 years from now it might be looked at as the best game ever made without realizing what kind of feedback and negative interactions happened when the game first launched. But it's bizarre to me that there would be such a difference for the Bayonetta series in particular, and such zealous hate for the Stellar Blade game coming out soon. You also have lengthy conversations on platforms discussing things like, once I realized the character named Eve was essentially a fighting sex doll, it kind of broke all immersion I had for the character, side character, setting, conflict, world building, plot, etc. We're saying things like, it lacks creativity, Eve has the face of a sex doll, and doesn't ooze sexuality like Bayonetta does. Which leads to a little bit more poignant of an argument. The big difference between Stellar Blade and Bayonetta's drama is that Stellar Blade's marketing is heavily focused around the main character's look. The devs are spending way too much time talking about how good looking she is, how they used a real model they scanned for accuracy, and just constantly yammering on about how proud they are with her design and nothing else. That means very little gameplay footage aside from that 9-minute demonstration. They don't go on and on about how sexy Bayonetta is, nor are they using her sexiness as a marketing stunt. Which is an interesting take for a game that hasn't been released yet. There's actually a ton of conversation right now around how Nier had an excellent story and atmosphere, and the gameplay played into that story development as well, though no one's been able to experience much of the gameplay for Stellar Blade other than the demo that we got. And while I did really like the gameplay of Stellar Blade and the overall representation and publishing of the game itself, it does feel like the story is going to be a little undercooked. But it seems that Shift Up is kind of unfazed by any of this and is focused steam forward ahead on getting this game out and into people's hands. Just a few days ago, the technical director and the CEO of Shift Up, the developer of Stellar Blade, sat down with an interview with a Korean game journalist, where most of the interview was talking about the game and where it sits in the gaming library of gamers all around the world. How the game itself is meant to be difficult, and it didn't start out that way, but over time, as they put more mechanics and more ebb and flow in the combat, countering, parrying, perfect dodging, perfect parrying to increase the combat, the game got harder and harder, and they sort of embraced it. In fact, they even touched on the fact that Stellar Blade was not ever meant to be for anyone under 18, in that they targeted 19 and up for people that really enjoy the kind of R-rated expression, cruel elements such as cutting enemies or using execution functions. The expression didn't discriminate between monsters, colleagues, men, and women. They wanted gore, guts, and realism. It was meant to heighten the emotions in a narrative sense. The background and the monsters were designed to be dark because it intended to make people nervous and explore what is ahead. Which, by the way, kind of reminds me of the anime and the 3D movie representation of the anime Gantz, in which they were faced off against these horrible monsters in humanity, and also featured some very sexualized representations. The fighting units are actually androids that are part of a women-only drop-off unit, and apparently there is a reason for it in the story that you'll find out as you actually start playing through the game. Kim also states that when it comes to allocating roles, it is not important whether it is a woman or a man, but it happens naturally due to the setting and the flow of the story. And when asked directly, relatedly, some Western media outlets expressed discomfort with the portrayal of female characters in Stellar Blade. Are you aware of these issues? And he responds, I know that in the West, game characters must reflect realistic appearances in many ways, and that numerous issues such as gender and racial diversity are intertwined. However, Stellar Blade is only entertainment and a cultural product. I hope you'll keep an eye on this, as a fun action game has just been released. The interviewer even asked if there are going to be any other playable characters than Eve, or if the focus is going to be around Eve as the main character. And Kim responds, there are not many single-player games in Korea that are narrative-oriented and have a clear ending. So for this game, we decided that it was very important to move the story forward while immersing ourselves in the main character, Eve. Therefore, the playable character is limited to Eve, and instead, various NPCs have been prepared that make it confusing whether they are enemies or allies. Various incidents and accidents unfold as we come into contact with them. And a very interesting question was posed as well. Even though it was my first attempt at a console title, the level of action is excellent. This is the interviewer saying that they first tried a console game and the level of action was good, and Eve's acrobatic movements were like watching a gymnast competing at the Olympics. And Kim responds, as I featured an attractive female warrior as the main character, I wanted to give it a different feel from the typical male action series. So I actually tried to express acrobatic movements by taking a lot of inspiration from ballet and gymnastics. Although Stellar Blade is our first console title, the main development team has worked together once on a major game called Blade and Soul, which we know has very similar representations, and because of that experience, they were able to bring a lot of these animations to life. So if you were to compare Stellar Blade's action of high rope swinging, jumping, sliding, spinning, and accentuating the female form through animation and movement to more of the gritty, overwhelming power that you see from something like God of War, that difference becomes all too clear. Now, some may make an argument that the representation of the character is why they ended up going with more of a gymnast animation style, and the other side could argue that the animation style was first and the character came after. Personally, for me, I'm in the camp of I don't really care what a game looks like as long as it's fun to play, or even if it's an interesting perspective. I've played many games that weren't really my style of game, but I forced myself to play it because I'm a games creator and I like to just experience the wealth of the genre and the medium across the board. So I played many games that were amazing in gameplay but looked like horribleness, and I played a lot of games that were beautiful but the gameplay just wasn't there. But what do you think? Is this something that is even worth talking about? Does the representation of Eve in Stellar Blade warrant this kind of discourse? Has the main character pulled you out of the game and ruined your immersion in the demo, or even just watching gameplay because of the focus on her feminine form? Is Bayonetta and all of its games quite different from Stellar Blade or even Nier Automata that have the same kind of representation of a main character and gameplay of an action style? Let me know what you think down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.